live?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Cool. All right, so hey guys, happy MRT week. It's 6:30, so we're gonna get started. I'm just seeing that a lot of you are commenting in the chat, which is awesome. Yeah, and welcome to our cooking lessons for today. We got my dad here. This is my kitchen, by the way. Welcome to my house. And yeah, so I'm just literally gonna let him do his thing, and I'll be behind the screens fielding any questions. So yeah. Go for it.
All right, thanks. So we have a iPhone set up on a tripod, so we have a few different angles we're going to get, so bear with us while the camera is bouncing around and resetting. Today we're just going to do a quick little pasta with sugo, pasta with a red sauce, tomato sauce. I want to talk a little bit about the pastas. We may reset this camera here for this one. A lot of options with pasta. You have lasagnas you can do, stuffed pasta shells. You can use pastas in soups and stews like pasta fagioli, a lot of things you can do there. I have some examples here. One thing that we should try to keep in mind when picking a pasta is the pasta should match the sauce. So for example, if we're doing a ragu, something with a meat sauce in it, you want something like a fusilli. I don't know if Matthew's going to come in here and get a close-up of this pasta. You want to do something with a fusilli so it kind of captures the pasta. Little elbow pasta is usually traditional for mac and cheese, something like that, cheese-based sauces. Just a quick note on rigatoni and penne. There's lots of different sizes. Penne, they have what we call penne lisce and penne rigate. Basically that means there's little ridges on them. It holds the sauce a little bit more, the flavorings. On the rigatoni as well, they have the smooth ones, which is lisce, and then they have the rigate, which has some grooves on it to hold the sauce. Lots of different sauce options, which I'll get to in a second. We're going to do the red sauce. We'll talk a bit about the tomatoes. A little bit about the long pasta. So we have short noodles, like the penne and the rigatoni and the fusilli. Long pastas, a lot of different versions. You have fettuccine, which is a broad noodle. These are in the dry pasta. We have spaghetti, linguine. Today we're going to do the spaghettini. I'm going to crack open this guy here. We're going to do that. I actually bunched these up. This is a good example of the quantity you should use per person. You typically just make your two fingers together like that. about 3/4 of an inch or so. That's usually a good volume of pasta serving per person, about 250 grams or so. So I just did that as examples, but we'll open that up later. I'll get into a little bit more about the tomato sauce in a second, but we have sometimes what we call like an anti-sauce or an oil-based sauce. We have pasta aglio olio, which is garlic and oils. You can add other things to them like capers. You have a puttanesca, which is also in that family, has some olives, things like that. We have cream-based sauces, like the mac and cheese is an example of a cream-based sauce. It starts with a bechamel, and you can do an Alfredo sauce. That's a cream-based sauce. Here we have some pancetta, if you want to do a carbonara. Pretty much our go-to sauces in our home are the red sauce, the tomato sauce. We like doing a meat sauce, a ragu or a bolognese. When we're doing some gnocchi or if we're doing a fresh fettuccine, sometimes we like to use some fresh sage in some brown butter and cook that in there. I'll get into a little bit more about these herbs. We're actually going to use some of these aromatics in a minute here. Tomatoes. Since we're doing the tomato sauce, I want to focus on the tomato sauce. We pretty much have canned and jarred. This is a passata, which is a strained ground tomatoes. I just have two different versions here. These are really easy to use. They're already processed. You just crack them open and cook with them. These are two examples. My favorite sauce, it's a little bit more expensive, or the tomatoes I mean, is the Italian tomatoes, San Marzano. These come from Italy. They're grown in Italy. They're ripened in Italy, and they're canned and processed there, and they come here. It's probably about 3 times the cost of Canadian one. We have great products in Canada. We have great tomatoes. This is just something a little bit of a treat. I actually love to use this on pizzas when we're doing pizzas in the oven. I've already opened one of these. It looks like this. I don't know if you can see that. It's just plum tomatoes. I'm actually going to grind these with the food processor in a second. But and you also have fresh tomatoes. You can add fresh tomatoes to it to add a little bit more sweetness. But that's it for the tomatoes. So the sauce that you make, usually there's basically 2 versions. So we're either going to make what we call a Sunday sauce, which is a long sauce that you're stewing different types of meats and things like that, that goes over a long period of time. Typically speaking, when you're doing a sauce during the week, it shouldn't take you any longer to make the sauce than it does to boil the water. So we're going to jump to boiling the water. Boiling water seems like a simple process. You put water in a pot and you boil it. Easy. A little bit more complicated because we got to talk about salt. We got to talk about the volume of the water. I already have a pot on here. I haven't salted it yet. Keep in mind when you put pasta in, so if you're using a smaller volume, use less water because you don't want it to come up too much, and you also don't want to crowd, so you have to use the right amount. As far as salt goes, I like to use, I'm just going to jump over here. We have 2 different versions of salt. We use in our house anyways, we have a kosher salt. This has great flavor. For example, if you're going to rim a margarita glass, you'd want to use this type of salt. You would never do it with an iodized salt. It would just be way too salty. But this is great for cooking pasta. It's saltier. You typically need less of this in a recipe. So if you're baking, for example, and it calls for salt and you're going to use kosher salt instead, you're always going to use a little bit more of the kosher salt. So I use this for actual cooking, and I use this type of salt for the water. Another question that comes up often is oil. Do you put oil in the water? The short answer is, really, you can do whatever you want. Same thing with the pastas and the sauces. One of the things we like to emphasize is cook how you like. Some famous chefs like Chef Michael Smith, he'll say the best recipe is cooking without a recipe. So you open your fridge, we're going to talk about different ingredients, onions, garlic. So for example, if you don't like garlic, don't use the garlic. If you don't like onion, don't use it. You might want to have the flavor of the onion, and I'll talk about a little bit more of that when we do the sofrito. But getting back to the oil, do you use oil in the water? Short answer is no. The reason is because the oil is going to coat the pasta and then the sauce won't stick. I did see a video, it was actually a Gordon Ramsay video, he was doing a shrimp scampi, and a lot of people commented on his, they were having a heart attack, especially the Italians. He put oil right into the water. He was using an angel hair pasta. Typically you don't do it. I suspect he did it because the angel hair pasta cooks so fast and it would stick together, it'll clump together, so you probably did it for that. But as a rule, you don't want to put oil in the water because the pasta sauce won't stick to the pasta. You typically don't want to rinse it. Some people will rinse the water. You're going to rinse off the starch, and the starch also helps the sauce stick to the pasta. And then also keep in mind, some recipes that you do, you may have seen this already, call for a little bit of the pasta water. So sometimes when you're doing a carbonara or an Italian dish from Rome, cacio e pepe, which is cheese and pepper, they actually use some of the pasta water in the making of the sauce. That's where the cream comes from. Like carbonara, for example, you might have it at an East Side Mario's or something, and it has a cream in it. I mean, it's good, that's how they do it. They get consistency out of it. It's the same every time, but typically it doesn't have cream. You get the creaminess from the starchy water. It's almost like making a risotto in that sense. So how much salt do you use? It all depends on what you're cooking. So for example, if you're cooking fresh pasta that either you made yourself or you picked up at the grocery store, the fresh pasta doesn't stay in the water as long. It'll typically take 90 seconds to 2 minutes to cook. So you maybe want to over salt the water so that you'll pick up that salt. The dry pasta, like we showed you before, that'll stay in longer, could take 12 minutes to cook. You want to use less. So it's a little bit trial and error. What we like to do is put a little bit of salt in the palm of your hand like that. It's usually about a tablespoon, tablespoon and a half, and then dump it right in. Okay, so I'm going to turn that back up and get that going. And that's it for the boiling the water. It seems simple, but there's a few little ins and outs to that. So let's get going with the aromatics. Actually, before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the safety in the kitchen. So, cutting boards. There's various types. I have a wood one here. I'm going to pull out one of our plastic ones that we use. If you can see that on there. Okay, they slide around. These boards also could slide around. I've seen a lot of even cooking shows and YouTube things where people are cutting and the board sliding around. Easiest thing to avoid that, just get either a paper towel or a tea towel, wet it, anchor the board. So when you're cutting, it doesn't have to be really wet, it just has to be damp, a little bit damp. Put your cutting board on it, it's not going to slide around, so you can go ahead and cook. Next thing is the knives. We're going to talk about knife safety, just a little bit, not too much. Knives are something that you have to be comfortable with how you're holding it. Just a few little safety things. Your knife should be sharp. A sharp knife, believe it or not, is safer than a dull knife. If you're trying to cut through something with a dull knife, you have more of a chance of getting hurt with the dull knife because it's not cutting through. As far as the sharpening, there's places you can buy. I think we have somewhere here some knife sharpeners that you can do by hand. You can take them to places to sharpen. You should sharpen your knives 2 to 3 times a year. These are a couple different versions of knives. They're not that expensive. This one actually, I bought a whole bunch of these at a kitchen supply store. They were like $16 or $18 each. But you should always have them sharp. And this is a honing device. You should always learn how to use it. You can use it away from you. I've always done it this way where I can sharpen it. And actually as you're going and it's held on the angle, you can feel if there's any burrs in there. And you should just give it a quick hone and your knife's sharp, or sharper than it was. Also another note on the cutting boards, I like to use wood or the plastic that we use to clean. I try to stay away from the glass as you're cutting. It'll dull the knife a lot sooner. Now holding the knives. This is something that you have to get used to, you have to get comfortable with. Most people that don't do a lot of cooking will hold the knife from the blade and sometimes put their finger. Again, it's whatever you're used to, whatever you're comfortable with. The correct way of doing it is to actually get your middle finger right up against the blade of the knife and then pinch it with your 2 fingers and hold it like this. This way you're locking it. You can control the direction of the knife this way. This way, as you're cutting, it could slip on you, right? Because it's rolling in your fingers. So holding it with the 2 fingers like that, you can control it. And when you're cutting, you're actually going to hold it a little bit away from you and not towards you. And I'll show you a little bit more about that knife technique. But if you can practice with something, or if you're holding it, It's better to use. Some people like using small knives. That's totally fine too. You can use a small knife like this, a paring knife, or like this to cut things. Totally fine. It's whatever you're comfortable with. I like to use more of a chef's knife or something like this. I have more control over it, feel more comfortable. So I'll probably, I'll keep both of these out. Okay, so we did the knives, cutting boards. Right, let's get to the aromatics. So this again, just to reiterate, it's really whatever you like. A lot of sauces will start with aromatics. Whether you're making stews or a roux or anything like that, you'll have some kind of aromatic. Typically, the popular sofrito or a mirepoix, as they call it, is carrots, onions, and celery. For these types of red sauces, you can cut them as big or as little as you want. I've seen people even puree them. You can puree them, put it that way in there. If you like it more chunky, you can cut it bigger. It's really whatever you like. I'm going to use today shallot and garlic. A quick little note on the garlic, right? To give it a little smash, comes apart. There's a couple of ways to introduce the garlic into a sauce. One way, in Italy they call it aglio in camicia, which basically means garlic in its shirt. So we basically take the whole garlic and we throw it in the fry pan. This way, the garlic is protected in a way of overcooking and getting brown and getting that bitter taste. Another way of doing it is cutting it really thin. There was a movie on TV where there was a couple guys in jail and they were cutting it really, really thin with a razor blade, and the thing was, oh, it's supposed to melt and disappear in the sauce. You can do it that way. I don't mind the texture of it, so I'm going to cut this. I usually give it a little smash to help the peel come off. Actually, I'm going to throw a couple little tips and tricks along the way. When you're cooking, it's good to have a garbage bowl. You can either leave it on the counter, stainless steel bowl, a glass, a cup, or whatever, just so you don't have garbage all over the place. In this case, I just use a little bowl. I just put it in the sink here so it's out of the way. I'll throw all the waste stuff in here and I'll deal with it after. So we're going to start with the garlic. Again, I don't mind it. Nobody in our family minds it, so I'm just going to cut it thin. Okay, and leave it a little bit chunky. Okay, and that's good enough. Now, the onion. You can use onion or shallots. I like the shallots. They're a little bit more delicate, kind of a cross between an onion and a garlic. So we'll cut that off. I'm going to cut it in half. It's the same principle as cutting an onion, cutting the layers. Peel that off. Peel this off. Okay, so now whether it's an onion or a shallot or anything with this type of layers, you notice how I cut it as well. So if it's an onion, we don't want to cut it this way. We would actually want to cut it from pole to pole. This way we get the half that way. And then we would clean top of it and leave the back part on so we have actually something. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and do it on this one. So we'll cut it there pole to pole. So if I was using this, we'd get rid of some of that. Let's put that back there. I would cut off the tip here. Get rid of that. Takes the skin off. I'll use this for another dish later on, but I just wanted to show. Right? And I would leave this little piece on the back because it's something to hold on to while you're cutting and processing this onion, and then we can just throw it out. Or if you're making a soup or a stew, you can actually keep this type of stuff and use it in that soup later on for flavor. Okay, so we have the garlic, and then we're just going to go ahead and cut long ways. Right, and just mince it. Okay, get rid of that. Okay, same thing with this half. But sauces are a good way to get vegetables in too. I mean, you can put spinach, You can put some of the cherry tomatoes, other types of vegetables. You can put zucchini. You can grind the zucchini in there. So, you know, if somebody has kids or, you know, someone that doesn't like vegetables, but you want to get the vegetable in the diet, a sauce is an awesome way to hide the vegetables. You can literally grate zucchini in there. So I've got this ready. We're going to get that going. The rest of this will actually go pretty quick. I'm going to puree the tomatoes. I have my hand blender ready. These were the, it was this can, the San Marzano tomatoes. I like the flavor, I like the texture. You'll experiment with different ones. You can get diced versions of these. If you like something a little bit more chunky, it all depends on what you're trying to do later. So I'm just going to go ahead and puree this and try not to wear it. Okay, so that's that. Done. So if you were going to make a pizza, this is actually how to go. You'd put some salt in this, you'd add some basil to this, and literally put it right on top of the pizza. You're going to end up using a lot less than you think for the pizza. So this is good. That's ready to go. So let's get into the cooking. And for this sauce, we could use parsley or we can use basil. Some of the other aromatics we can use, this is some chili flakes. A lot of different, you know, the more south you go, closer to the equator, you'll find a lot spicier dishes. You can add this while you're cooking. It'll lose a little bit of its potency. It'll become less hot as you're cooking. This is another thing, like the herbs, which I forgot to mention. Most of the herbs, other than the sage, because you want to brown the sage with it, but most of the herbs you want to add at the end of the cooking process. You can add the hot peppers in it while you're cooking. You can also add it later. I know, for example, in Italy, the southern Italy, like Calabria, they even have a chili oil. It's very popular. You can put the oil on top of the pasta just to add a little bit of heat. I'm not going to use it. I put it out to show. Not many people like that. By the way, the pine nuts. I just want to jump up to this real quick. These are pine nuts. Great for making a pesto. I wanted to talk about the pine nuts really quick because some people will toast the pine nuts before you grind them, before you make your pesto. That's great if you want to bring out the flavor, but just keep in mind, most people in Italy won't toast the pine nuts. The reason is because you want to get the creaminess out of it, not the nuttiness. So if you're going to make a pesto, you can try it both ways. Whichever way you like is great. For us, we don't toast them because we like the pesto to be a little bit more creamy. So the water's boiling. I have these ingredients ready. I think maybe it would be a good idea if we move the camera over here. So bear with us while everything bounces around a little bit. I'm actually going to rearrange some things here so I can show the sauce. Okay, so water's up to temperature. A couple other little things. Oil actually cools things down. If you're in a hurry, it's actually better to let the pan heat up before you put the oil. It takes longer to heat up with the oil in it. So I have a gas stove. Heats up pretty quick. The flame's on right away. You can see that. So that gets hot pretty quick. I'm going to add the oil now. So again, just let the pan heat up. Even when you're doing something frying, it's good to let the pan heat up first, add the oil. You'll actually end up with a ready hot oil for frying faster than if you were to add the oil when it's cold. So again, the garlic is a little bit more sensitive and it will burn a lot quicker. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add the onions, or shallots in this case. And you can hear that starting to sizzle already. Let's add all of those. Salt. We talked about the salt already. This is the kosher salt that we're going to add. I'm going to give this a little bit of a stir. And let's go ahead and add a little bit of salt. I'm going to salt in layers as we go. We're going to taste. So do you need more salt, less salt? You're going to taste it and see. So I like to add a little bit of salt while I'm cooking the aromatics. It helps it come out a little bit better, the flavors. They're starting to get translucent. I'm going to add the garlic. Give that a quick little stir. Okay, you can already smell it. And you know, that's pretty much it. Different stoves have different temperatures. Keep that in mind. This is going really quick. I don't know if you're cooking along or if you're doing it another day. You'll see this went fast because this burner puts out a lot of heat. On this particular stove, actually, that one puts out the most. So this is already ready. I'm going to add the tomatoes. This is the ones that I pureed. You hear that splashing around a little bit. Someone's going to have to do some cleaning. Give that a little stir. Okay. And all we really want to do with this, we want to bring it up to temperature. I'm going to add a wee bit more salt. I'm just used to it. I know how much I'm adding. I'm going to taste it later and adjust it. A little bit of pepper, not too much. We didn't have any of the pepper flakes. So let's just give this a stir. And that's it. That's it for the sauce. Really simple. Leftover sauce. Again, great for pizza. If you want to do a compound sauce, just letting this come to temperature, we'll drop the pasta in a second, so we just have a couple seconds to talk about something here. The tomato sauce is one of the 5 mother sauces. There's other sauces like hollandaise, bechamel, there's other sauces. From those, like for example, a béarnaise sauce, it comes from the hollandaise sauce. From the tomato sauce, we can do a penne alla vodka, you can do rosé. That's where you can add vegetables or mushrooms. There's so many other things you can do with it. So if you have leftover sauce, put it in the fridge and use it another day for another recipe. I'm going to turn this down a bit. And I'm going to cover it. Okay, and just let that sit. The amount of time, it should be on a medium-low for about 15 minutes. And then that'll be good. We're actually going to cook it again with the pasta when the pasta is ready. So my water's been boiling over here. It's no problem. I'm going to reach over and grab the spaghettini. This is like spaghetti, it's just smaller. There's a smaller version of this, angel hair pasta. This brand, there's a lot of brands. I like this brand for a few reasons. It's a little bit more expensive, but I like the hard box. So when you're taking it home from the grocery store, it stays in one piece, doesn't break. Also, I believe the dyes that they use are brass. So what happens is, as the pasta is being processed through the dye, it gets a little bit of a rough texture to it. And I like that rough texture on the pasta because, again, the sauce sticks to it better. And texture is one of the things when you're eating, you want, aside from the flavor and the temperatures and so on, texture is something that you want to pay attention to. So I like how this sticks to it. So the amount that I'm going to do, that's probably a good amount. I'm going to add a little bit more. Remember how we looked at the bunched up pasta for one person? That's a little bit more, that's a bigger diameter. That's good for 2 people. So this is simple. We just give it a little bit of a twist, drop it in, that's it. That's how spaghetti or long noodles go into boiling pot of water. And then almost right away, the bottom part's going to start to get soft. So we're just going to just grab it and twist it and get it all in there. Okay? So, how long does it take to cook? Follow the directions on the pack. Fresh pasta will take usually a minute or so to 2 minutes, for example. Some of the harder pasta noodles could take 7 to 12 minutes or longer. When it gets close to the doneness, that's really an individual preference. We like al dente. Most Italians like al dente. All that means is it's a little bit more firm, has a little bit of a chew, a little bit of a crunch to it. If you like it softer, by all means, you can cook it as long as you like. We like it al dente. And then another note on cooking the pasta. We like to sauce the pasta with the sauce in the pan. So there's a few ways to do it. I went a little bit more complicated because I made a batch of sauce. You could strain this in a strainer, dump it all out, add the sauce, cook it, serve it. I went an extra step. I got a frying pan. This actually, if you were doing something, if you wanted to do shrimp, if you wanted to do something else, some other type of protein or vegetable, you can add it to the pan, add the sauce, add the pasta, serve everything together. While this is going, I'm actually going to serve a little bit of bread, a little bit of surprise addition ingredient. All I did is just an Italian loaf of bread. I just cut it up into pieces and I'm just putting it in the oven, little toaster oven, just to keep it nice and warm. And we're going to serve that. So as you see, the sauce took almost nothing to make. If I wanted to reverse the order and cook the pasta first, I could have done that too, because by the time the pasta cooks, the sauce really, it's pretty much done. Unless you're doing some other kind of compound sauce. Then we'll get to, we talked about the herbs already. Fresh, actually, you know what, while we're doing that, I'm waiting for this. A little bit of time to kill. I'm going to, maybe we can move the camera. I'm going to surprise Matthew with some extra camera angles that we weren't planning on. Okay, basil. Absolutely love the smell of basil. It's a great spring aroma. Basil goes great with fresh tomatoes. You just want to make a basil tomato salad. If you want that bread, we call it a panzanella. Awesome. So how do you handle the basil? Just a little French term, it's called chiffonade. We're going to just get a couple of the leaves, 2 or 3, based on how much you're cooking, and just put the leaves together. Just roll them up. This is called chiffonade. We're not going to dice them or chop them. Basil is very delicate. The more we process the basil, the softer it gets. We're just going to cut them into ribbons. Okay? Just very simply into ribbons. We're going to put this aside. And we're going to garnish. We're going to garnish the pasta when it's done. So that's ready. We're just going to put that in when we're cooking the pasta with the sauce. You can add parsley too if you like. I'm going to just check on the pasta here. Okay, so you can see, well, I can see, I'm closer, the pasta's limp, right? So you can tell it's starting to cook. I can actually feel it just by experience. I know, I can feel it with the tongs that the pasta is cooked, but I can feel it's a little bit tough still. Right, here's an example. So the noodle, you know, it bends, but it still has a little bit of firmness to it. It cracks. You can taste it. Still raw. Yeah, it needs a few minutes to go still. So we'll let that go. And sauce is ready. Yeah, that's it. While that's going, we can talk about cheese. Okay? So, if you like cheese, put it. If you don't like cheese, don't put it. What type of cheese should you use? Usually a firm cheese, something firm. So there's Grana Padano, there's Parmigiano, you can use a Pecorino Romano. The undisputed king of cheese, Parmigiano Reggiano. We absolutely love this cheese. We like it's firm, it has a good flavor, it's not too sharp. The Pecorino or the Romano cheese, it's a little bit more of a sharp cheese, has a different aroma. Some people are used to it, some people like that, by all means use it. You don't want to be using something like a mozzarella or a feta or something like that, but honestly, if you really want to, you can go ahead and do that. We don't normally do that. If you're going to do, let's say pasta al forno. you're gonna use something like this. It's almost like making a lasagna. You're gonna have your sauce. You're gonna parboil your noodles till they're just past the halfway point, and then layer it in a baking dish. Then you want to use a mozzarella because you would use a mozzarella in a lasagna. That's actually something you can make ahead. So go ahead and cook the noodles, layer it with some tomato sauce, some parmigiano, some mozzarella, more pasta. Put that in a dish. You can even leave it in the refrigerator. If you're going to have guests or you're going to have a party, pop that in the oven for 30 minutes or 40 minutes. Let all the cheese melt. Everything comes up to temperature. There you go. You have pasta al forno. And it's a great make ahead thing. I'm going to check the pasta. Okay. At this point, I want to taste it. That's a good, needs a few seconds more. While that's waiting a few seconds more, let's talk about leftovers. Leftover pasta. Spaghetti's great. I'll talk about in a second what to do with the spaghetti. My preference, if I'm bringing leftover pasta for lunch, I don't want to have to twirl the spaghetti. That's something where you use a penne or a rigatoni or a fusilli, something like that. You can heat it up in the microwave. I love heating up pasta in a frying pan. It gives great texture to it. Another interesting recipe you could do, you can actually get spaghetti or really anything else. Typically we do it with spaghetti. We'll get spaghetti and we'll almost make like an omelet. We'll scramble a few eggs, mix the spaghetti with the sauce and everything, put it in a frying pan. Low temperature, let that all cook, almost like a quiche or an omelet, and then flip it, let that cook again. If it's really thick, you might want to put it in the oven a little bit just so the egg cooks throughout the middle. And basically you've made yourself an omelet or a spaghetti omelet or a spaghetti pie. You can actually cut that. That's a great brunch thing to do. Good weekend thing. Even coming home after work or school, you can make that spaghetti thing, leave it in the fridge, heat that up again, stays together, really easy to eat. That's a lot of fun. And I like the soft texture and the crispiness that you get from frying it. So let's turn that on. Okay, so this is ready. Always put a little bit more pasta than you think you're going to need because, like me, I tasted a lot. There's going to end up being less. So, we're pretty much ready to go. So let's get a ladle. I'm just heating up this frying pan real quick. Actually, you want to change positions here again. Sorry about the moving around. Just to get a good view. And then I'll plate this over there after. So, okay. So, this sauce is ready. It's good to go. It smells great. I'm going to add a little bit of the frying pan. We're going to take our spaghetti. Okay. Don't be afraid of the pasta water. It actually helps with the consistency. Again, sometimes people keep that starchy water for different recipes, like if you're doing a carbonara or a cacio e pepe or even an all'olio, having that little bit of the starchy water helps give it a nice creamy consistency. So let's take that off in the back. Okay, so what we have here, I'm going to do this one too as well. We'll need that. The pasta and the sauce. We're going to coat it. Now you can see I made quite a bit of sauce. That whole bunch of sauce, we're going to have as leftovers. You don't really need a lot to dress the pasta. You know, so whether this is any of the other short pastas, same idea. You want to cook it. If you put the spaghetti or any of the pasta on the plate, it just sticks together and it's dry and it doesn't have any of the flavor. So now we're getting all of this flavor right on the spaghetti. Okay? And at this point, I want to add my herbs. So adding the basil, great aroma. Okay, so that's it. Now, if you're hungry, you can go ahead and eat this right out of the bowl, out of the frying pan if you want, but I don't recommend that. Okay, so you see that was just 2 ladles of sauce for all this pasta. This is a good 2 to 3 servings. For me, I'd probably do 2 servings. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so what we want to do is plating. I want to talk a little bit about the plating. All my burners are off. Yeah, let's move the camera back over here. Okay. Couple different ways of plating. Just, yeah, perfect. That's good. I'm just going to shut that off. Okay. Let's get another ladle. I'm going to get a nice portion of the pasta and we're going to twirl it in a ladle. Okay? So it's twirled in the ladle. That's it. Okay, we're going to finish that with a little bit of the fresh sauce on top. Let's grab a little bit of fresh basil. Okay. Then we get our Parmigiano and we grate some fresh Parmigiano. Okay. And that's it. Yeah, you should always do a nice presentation. If you had meatballs, you can put the meatballs inside there. If you had another dish or another protein, shrimp, you can put them along the side, whatever. But this is our spaghettini with tomato sauce. I'm going to do another little plating technique. This one. I'm actually going to move the pan to here. Grab a spoon. This is just another little plating technique. You might have seen it in some restaurants or some pictures. You can use the other tongs that I was using, or you can get some long tweezers like this, cooking tweezers. Give it a nice little twirl. Okay, put it on the plate. Okay, and we can serve it like that. We have some, and you can see there's still, those are 2 good portions, and you can see there's still quite a bit of pasta left over. I don't know if you saw that. You see that? Okay. We're going to put a little bit of sauce on that as well. And of course, always a little bit of Parmigiano. Okay, if you want to make this a meal, you can put something else. I like to try to put it on a third of the plate, leave some negative space. And why not, let's throw some basil on there as well. We try to get some of the smaller leaves for that. Okay. And then we reach in for our warm bread. That's it. Even this one here, I don't know if we can kind of grab both of them. That's it. Plated 2 different ways. That's yeah, spaghettini with al pomodoro with the red sauce. That's it.
Cool. Awesome. Let's just move this back over here.
Actually smells really good, so I'm looking forward to eating this.
Yeah, I know. I'm actually looking forward to eating it as well. Alright guys, that's everything. Thanks for coming to the cooking lessons. Hopefully you guys learned some stuff. And yeah, I'm gonna go eat this because it's good. So I'll see you guys later.